We have with us Nicki Scully, author, shamanic healer, and priestess of the Egyptian mysteries since 1983. Her first visit to Egypt was with the Grateful Dead. How many of us can say that? She still visits holy lands and mystical places to this day, and she organizes trips to these sites for the enrichment of spiritual seekers. Visit her and check out her books and the different trip packages she has at shamanicjourneys.com. And Nikki, are you there? How are you?
I am here, Stephen, and I'm fine, and I'm delighted to be talking to you.
Thank you. Likewise, I have a lot of questions for you tonight. I don't really know much about spirit allies, so I hope the questions aren't too tough for you, I should say. But the first thing that confuses me is you mentioned different families of spirit allies. Can you elaborate or talk more about these different families of spirit allies?
I'm not sure where you found that on my website. I noticed you said you found that on my website. So I wouldn't exactly. It's not how I would usually approach it. But there are so many different forms of spirit allies that you could call them in families. For example, the Egyptian pantheon is my spiritual family because I've been, my trip with the Grateful Dead to Egypt was in 1978, but since then I've led more than 60 trips to Egypt. And so my passion with Egypt really developed along with the relationship that I developed with that pantheon, which is called, in Egypt it would be called the Neteru of Egypt. And so that would be a family. Whether you would, how you would subset the ascended masters or angels or animal totems or plant spirit allies, by species or perhaps family. They're all family to me because we are one family.
Right. I actually read about there's a Skype seminar or a web seminar on the topic of power animals, plant spirits, and other spirit allies, and there it referenced various animal totems, plant medicine spirits, and members of various spiritual families, and so that made me think, well, could there be a hierarchy among these among these spiritual allies?
I see where you got it. You got it right from me.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. But
I
I
was
kind of
thinking
filtered it. I
family
don't know
that
anything
day.
about this.
Because, well, when I wrote, and that workshop is coming up this month, actually. It's going to be 4 evenings, an hour and a half apiece. And we really have a lot of fun working together on the telephone or Skype or, however you choose to do it. It's a web-based program that we use. And I really enjoy this because since I wrote one of the original books on power animal meditations, it was first published in 1991 as The Golden Cauldron and then added to and renamed Power Animals 10 years later, or Power Animal Meditations. And there's 50 different totems in that book. And so they're all part of my family, too. It's like we are living on this huge organism, and we are part of this organism, and so is all other sentient beings and creatures and even elements themselves. And so wherever there's consciousness, which is pretty much everywhere, every member of the family would have as much invested in the healing of the planet as we do. I know you asked later, why would spirit allies bother with us at all?
Mm-hmm.
And it's because we're all connected. So if we don't get it together to find solutions to the grave challenges that are now facing us, mostly because of our own behavior, then everybody goes with us. And many, many, many species are going extinct every single day. And it's, yet we think of ourselves as being the most conscious beings on the planet, and yet we've totally forgotten that with that intelligence comes responsibility. And with the power that we have comes the responsibility to steward the planet that hosts us and to look after and make sure that nature is held sacred and that the world is harmonious. And we have utterly failed. And the consequences, if we don't get it together, are going to be really dire. And we can't do it alone. We have to recognize and honor the intelligence of all the beings that we share this planet with. Because just like your friend Steve is really into astrology, and I may really be into shamanism or tarot insofar as I have written an oracle, there's many things that I haven't had a chance to learn, and many gifts that I don't have that thankfully you or Steve or somebody else has, and it might be an animal or a plant. And so we have to open ourselves and realize, as chauvinistic as we might be, that just because the animals don't communicate in our given tongue or whatever languages that we've learned doesn't mean that they don't have intelligence and can't communicate with us.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense, because think of all the cloudy communication in human relationships. Orson Welles' broadcast of the War of the Worlds springs to mind there. We can't even communicate with each other competently. And my dog, my Cocker Spaniel Max, he teaches me loads of things every single day. Probably the most important thing he's taught me is what it must have been like to raise me when I was young. So the idea that I can learn something from animals is very easy for me to make. Now, what I'm curious to learn more about is the spiritual behavior and importance of the botanical world. This is a fascinating topic to me.
Oh, that's a fascinating one to me, too. Given my history, which you have a clue of, I also happen to own the land in California where the California School of Herbal Studies has been living since the early 80s. And that land came to me through a magical gift of a magical plant that the owner was using at the time to help him figure out what to do with his land. And I have tremendous respect for herbs as healers and for certain herbs for their magical and divine properties. And I noticed that you lived in Peru for a long time and that you found coca, which is ubiquitous or it was before we started messing with their culture, in Peru. And yet, when it was refined and turned into cocaine, it became this horrendous bane in our and almost every other culture on the planet. And you ask, what should we do about plants that, under malicious human manipulation, unleash toxic and harmful effects on humanity? Should we take it out on the plant, or the human? And I really wanted to address that question, so I'll start with that.
Okay.
The coca plant, if you were to look it up botanically, is probably the, if not one of the healthiest plants on the planet. And in those mountains of Peru, Peru has more systems, I forget, biosystems, because of the changes in elevation than any other country in the world, I believe. And there are very harsh living conditions. And so the coca plant not only helped them to oxygenate at the higher levels, but it was their currency. It's what held their culture together, because it's also what kept them going and gave them the strength and stamina to live under such harsh conditions. And then along comes the bad boys and turns it into cocaine, and then you get the power and greed, and suddenly the whole culture starts deteriorating because their access becomes limited. It's no longer their currency, and when they're under, receiving aid from countries like the United States, there are stipulations. And we see that all over the world. And so I think my answer is obvious.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's taking out on, it's changing the way that we view these botanicals. It's certainly what's going on in this country around marijuana as they discover the amazing ways in which certain aspects of the marijuana plant can help people, heal people, relieve pain. The same thing, of course, is true with the poppy, but heroin is just murderous. Mm-hmm. So when we go back to a shamanic way of living in harmony with nature, then those problems, they just don't even exist in that world. And the plants are used in the way that they were naturally meant to be used. And some of them to commune directly with spirit at a level where the meaning of shamanism, a shaman is one who can walk between the worlds, travel into different dimensions to bring back power and healing for their communities. And the source of the word shaman actually came from, the actual tribe name is slipping my mind, but it's in Siberia. Right. And so throughout the entire world, the indigenous, pre-religious, meaning dogmatizing of spirit, was shamanic in nature. And there were those who were called, and there were those that were recognized, and those that were called were given incredibly or those who were recognized at birth through astrology or through signs that the tribes and clans and traditional cultures of whatever region you're in knew to recognize, and then there was rigorous training that went with that. Well, when this country and Australia is another really good example, restricted and basically wiped out the indigenous cultures that were there that preceded them, they didn't have anything to replace that knowledge with. I mean, it's still there, and there are those that are trying to hold it together, trying to keep the languages together, and the stories and the dream time connections with the land in Australia, and here in this country, struggling to keep their dances and their way of life. But they were starved, they were taken away from their lands, their whole way of life was taken from them, and so it had become much more difficult. So what seems to be happening is people are called, and they may think they're going crazy, but in that Tungus tribe, that's the name of the tribe in Siberia, the calling was you would go crazy, and that would be the sign that if you did not accept your role as shaman, then you would stay crazy. But if you did, then you would be able to serve your community, and that craziness would be transformed into the gifts of the shaman to be able to help their community.
That's very interesting. It seems to me as if there's a difference in the way that we Westerners even perceive nature, because even the most well-intentioned of us, we still tend to look at nature as something that exists to serve us. What kind of planet are we leaving our children? Whereas the shaman, it seems to be more concerned with what sort of children are we leaving to the planet. Is there that sort of relationship of nature, not as something to be conquered, but as something to be cooperated with, that I think might unlock the power to heal of the spiritual allies.
Exactly. In some tribal shaman communities, it's the shaman's job to keep the health of the community, and so when somebody gets sick, it's like they have somehow failed in their responsibility. So that's also another way of looking at nature and health quite differently. It's not that way in all shamanic systems, but there are no laws, there's no rules, there's no dogma attached to it. There are rituals and initiations to help people to mark the changes and transformations in their lives, and they are celebrated when they move from being a baby to a child, and from a child to a teenager, and then when the women get their menses, or when the men, become a man. I mean, these are times to be celebrated, and truly some of the religions have, brought the idea through, but they do it much differently than shamanic cultures. Like a bar mitzvah and a ritual of manhood in Africa are going to be two very, very different experiences.
Yes, they are, and I think the the Western way of doing things has like you mentioned the word dogma, and sometimes I substitute the word bureaucracy for dogma because dogmatic thinking inevitably leads to paperwork and rules and all of this good stuff.
Institutions.
Institutions, and the shaman says, no, you can reap the benefit of spiritual alliances with plants and with animals, with nature, and you don't even have to get the state involved. You don't have to get the institution involved. This is this by doing this can be a personal thing, and it'll make you a better thread in the quilt of humanity and all existence. It's a very beautiful,
Well,
beautiful
and
concept.
there are countries, including this country, in which certain divine plants, such as peyote here or ayahuasca in Brazil, or San Pedro in Peru, are legal. They are
Mhm.
considered a part of the spiritual culture of the country that keeps it together and harmonious. Where, I mean, it's certainly helping in the struggle for Native Americans to be able to integrate the old ways in with the new ways.
Mhm.
And, I was very surprised when I discovered that how they've mixed the old with the new, how in many of the peyote churches, how much they honor Jesus in the same way as in the Santa Daime or other parts of the ayahuasca culture that is so prevalent right now. And so it's as though, everywhere you see a church in some of these countries, it's built on top of an original natural power place or temple.
Yeah, I can.
It's even true in Egypt. There's in Luxor Temple, there's still a mosque sitting on top of the temple that's still functioning. But they excavated the temple out from under it, so it's still on top of the temple.
There's something archetypal about Egyptian religion, I think, that set its stamp on all of the entire Western monotheistic tradition. And what's always fascinated me about Egyptology and Egyptian religion is their veneration of canines and felines. You see dogs and cats. They in a lot of the hieroglyphs. They
You mean
associated.
Anubis? You're talking about Anubis and Sekhmet and Bast
Right, right. These canine
and
deities,
Wapwet.
and I think they have a funerary role. They're attached to the spirit. I mean, how did the cats and the dogs? These are very important and very common spiritualities. A lot of us have cats and dogs. So I'm hoping, to help people understand how to forge a deeper spiritual alliance between their pet by.
Well, I've written 2 books on through Anubis, the Shamanic Mysteries of Egypt and the Anubis Oracle, which certainly shows that his function was much broader than funerary,
Ah,
although he's
gotcha.
known for that because he was the one who knew how to, when they brought back all the pieces of his dead father Osiris, how to do the mummy wrapping.
I see.
But he is many things. He's the psychopomp. He's the opener of the way. He's a teacher and a guide. And in fact, I'm wearing a pendant of him around my neck. He's.
Huh.
I don't go anywhere without honoring him, especially Egypt, because I feel that he's got my back, my front, my sides, my top, and my bottom.
Total
And
protection.
I can rely on that just like if I had a German Shepherd that grew up with me you know,
Ah, yes.
that
Fidelity.
loyalty and that the depth of that friendship is so great, and it's no different. And with regard to Sekhmet, who is, well, there's Bast, which is like the kitty, the domestic cat, and then there's Sekhmet, the lioness,
Hmm.
and she is very, very prominent right now. And I'm working on a book that will be published in the next year or so on Sekhmet, and she is both the destroyer and the healer, the quintessential healer. And yet she, when she was quickly, as the myth goes, or legend, when she, at a time when the earth was in this level of disrespect, at least, and no longer paying homage or honoring the sun and remembering how things go together in a balanced and a harmonious way, she was sent to the planet to straighten things out, because she's the guardian of Ma'at. And Ma'at is truth, justice, balance, harmony, the
Hmm.
celestial order of things. And so Sekhmet, who is the feminine face of the sun, has a lioness head and a woman's body, came down in her lioness form, and she took a look at what was happening, and in her fury, which was based in compassion, she was ready to wipe out the whole human race. Because how can we treat each other and the planet and other parts of nature the way we do?
So it was
And
Sekhmet's,
so,
and I think
well,
Sekhmet is a very good symbol for modern femininity because of its solar nature.
oh well, that's certainly a way of looking at it.
I don't think
What
I don't think
what
modern
happened?
femininity has a solar symbol that's quite appropriate to what it means to be successful in the corporate environment, for instance. To compete in a man's game, quote unquote, to use a cliche. I think Sekhmet is a very nice archetype for that sort of feminine
Well,
approach.
definitely, if I lived in that world, she would be going with me everywhere. She goes with me everywhere anyway, because I'm a healer.
Right.
And
It's very interesting to me because I'm reminded of a little similarity with Hinduism. I'm reminded of the goddess Kali, who also
they're
plays a destroyer and also giving birth to the entire, giving birth to nature, a destroyer and
exactly.
a creator all at once. I'm also reminded of my mother, who would to tell me, "I brought you into this world, and I can take you out of it." So it's a very interesting blend of energies to me, as shown in Sekhmet.
Well, it's really her time when things get this out of whack. And so she's calling people right and left. I'm going to a consecration of a temple outside of Las Vegas that was dedicated to her. And a beautiful statue had been made for it, and people in the area that come from magical or shamanic or Egyptological backgrounds would go there. And somebody stole their statue recently.
Oh,
It's just outrageous.
yeah.
And so somebody made a new one, and in August, I think it is, I was invited to come and speak at the public consecration of the new statue. But just the fact that there's so little understanding that people would, the word that comes to mind is pillage a
Yeah.
sacred place of that nature that's just out in the desert, not bothering anybody, not even near anything.
Yeah, it's a desecration. It's terrible to treat the.
Definite desecration.
Well, Nikki, we got to
And
take a 1 minute long commercial real quickly,
okay,
and we will be back in just 1 second. You can find Nicki Scully at shamanicjourneys.com. She has more books that I can even list, a prolific author, and we'll be right back in 1 minute.
A new era in psychic services has begun. PsychicAccess.com. You can connect with our psychic advisors by telephone or chat 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All of our psychic advisors are interviewed, fully verified, and accuracy tested, assuring you quality service. We're living in some very troubled times right now. More and more, the world's problems are affecting us on a personal level. You don't have to deal with this alone. Our highly accurate psychics, caring advisors, and talented mediums can help with situations you are currently experiencing and can let you know what the future may hold for you. All new customers get a free 6-minute reading. All you have to do is register. Why not visit us now and get a free reading at psychicaccess.com.
All right, we are here with Nicki Scully talking about spirit allies and shamanism and how to get in touch with these spirit allies in a practical way, in a day-to-day type of level. And Nikki, welcome back. This is such a fascinating conversation with you. I'm enjoying it.
thank you. I'm enjoying it too.
Well, we talked about ancient Egypt and how they would think of our modern pets. One thing that's bothered me a lot is that, going through some of the ancient literature, it seems like a lot of, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, they care about what goes into my mouth. And I wanted to ask you your opinion if you think a carnivorous diet is compatible with advanced spirituality.
It hasn't really bothered me.
Thank God.
What you have to remember is, and this is really, I believe, a truth. You are what you eat.
Yes.
And so whether it's the television you watch or the meat that you buy or the vegetables that you grow, the only meat that I'll eat, it has to be grown with care and with love and not caged or mishandled in any way, and it has to be totally organic. Otherwise, right, I have no use for it. Because what happens, the more conscious you become, the more you realize that you're not only what you eat, you're also what you say, what you do, and even what you think.
Yes.
And once you realize the power of your thoughts, then you find what it is that you have to do to regulate yourself. So, for example, we were talking about the myth of Sekhmet. What they did to bring her down so that humanity was not completely lost was they mixed up, I think it was 7,000 vats of barley beer. And barley beer was a little different than the beer that we drink today. It had very healthful qualities to it. But they spiked it with, you hear different stories, mandrake root, some poppy, some pomegranate juice. They made it look like blood. And the way the myth goes, when she woke up from napping, which she had to do eventually, and she saw this, what looked like blood pouring around her, that she supposedly started drinking it, thinking it was blood, until she got drunk and then was pacified.
Huh.
Well, there's a few problems with the story as it's been interpreted. First of all, she can distinguish between blood and beer. And second of all, the truth is that was medicine for her. And just like many of the divine plants are medicine for those of us who recognize their power to take you from a place of fear to a place of love. Wow. That's why they're doing all these experiments now with PTSD and with terminal cancer.
It's we still have a lot to learn from the natural world. From the modern pharmaceutical industry, I think would probably benefit most from hearing our talk tonight, because I think if they could get a little bit more creative, like in a healthy way, you know, not in a strictly technical way.
There was Albert Hoffman. I mean, he was the one that took the bicycle ride and discovered the value of LSD. And he lived to be 100 and I can't remember, but he became a centenarian, and he's quite celebrated that by those that understood the incredible influence that his particular pharmaceutical had on the planet and on an entire culture.
Well, you know, you mentioned something kind of scary. You talked about the way that in the beginning of Australia, as a legal personality in the modern world, during the beginning, they started sort of erasing Aboriginal culture. And so, you know, what if someone is like, oh my goodness, I would love to be able to reconnect with, you know, this reservoir of Aboriginal knowledge about botanicals, but, you know, where could I turn to? Are there any sources that perhaps resurrect that body of knowledge, that body of Aboriginal knowledge that we can turn to in the modern day?
I haven't been to Australia for some time, but when I was there, I met a man named Burnham, who was an Aboriginal elder who was very open, and we never talked about psychedelics or anything like that, but we certainly talked about how that culture was do you recall ever seeing a book called The Mutant Message from Down Under?
No, I've never heard of it, but I like the title.
It was not very well written, but incredibly fascinating. Had me on the edge of my chair through the whole time I read it, to the point where I called the woman that wrote it, because what she was describing in terms of the healing techniques when she was supposedly kidnapped and taken on walkabout were so similar to the techniques that I was using. And so I told Burnham about it, and he wanted to connect with her because he wanted to know what tribe this was. Mm-hmm. And so I put them together, and she went to Australia, and she was completely hounded by the government, and basically, you know, I don't know whether she was formally deported, but she needed to leave there. And her book was selling so fast that she couldn't handle it. So when Harper's came to her, she sold it to them, and they made her write on it that it was fictitious.
Oh.
And which really kind of took the wind out of it. But it doesn't matter. I happen to believe it. Burnham certainly believed it. And what they were so upset about was that there was an unregistered tribe somewhere out there that they didn't know about that had the full capacity of their ways and managed to get this message to us. And the message ultimately was, you're destroying the world. Stop. You know,
Right.
This is how we do it.
It's I can imagine it's very difficult to piece together all of these from when you consider the entire mass of oppressed Aboriginal peoples in North America, South America, the Western, Eastern Hemisphere, Western Hemisphere. When you think about all of that, the local knowledge that's been lost, it seems to be sort of a patchwork type of effort, piecing together knowledge from this geography, you know, this place, this other place. It's going to be very difficult. But I want to ask you this question here. So,
can
yes,
I speak to that first before you
Absolutely.
go on?
Sure,
because you brought up a really important point.
Okay.
It's not that difficult. It's a matter of being present. And it's a matter of being present with your eyes and your ears and your senses and your focus and your consciousness open fully at the heart, so that you can be in communion at any point with any aspect of nature.
That sounds
and get
difficult.
guidance. So it's not that hard. It's a matter of realizing the possibility, and if you can't do it for yourself, finding a righteous person to consult with that you trust. And that comes from the gut and the heart. I mean, that level of discrimination sometimes takes a bit of developing, because there are all kinds of people out there exploiting the shamanic traditions, which is why I didn't call my book Shamanic Healing. I called it Alchemical Healing. I knew it would reduce the volume of sales, but I wasn't really, I was looking for healers. I wasn't looking for wannabes.
Right.
Do you understand the difference?
Yes,
for
you were looking
people who
for the
are
righteous
truly
healer.
in service. Because power is a double-edged sword.
Yeah. I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. When you talk about the way that I think of myself in relation to nature, is it correct to say that you're advocating like trying to merge my consciousness sometimes during meditation with whatever means my consciousness with the almost like a nature sort of consciousness or a universal sort of consciousness?
Either or and all, however you choose to look at it. Personally, this is my personal opinion, is that our brains, although they may be wired in such a way for us to understand, we are not either sophisticated enough or in tune enough to understand truly the concept of God. However, God is everywhere, and God is in everything. So when you are speaking, whether it's to your dog or to Anubis, you are speaking to an aspect of God, which can speak the truth from its perspective.
Now my challenge becomes perceiving that truth and understanding that truth from the source's perspective, whether that be a dog or my bonsai tree on my desk or whatever spirit ally I'm trying to communicate with.
I'm not sure I get you. Say it
again. You're talking. You say that when we, for example, when I talk to my dog, I'm talking to an aspect of godhood, and that in order to understand, you know, what that aspect of God says to me in return, then I have to be prepared to translate the language of my dog somehow. That's sort of what I'm trying to ask.
That's correct. So you have to move into a consciousness that's beyond language.
Oh, wow. It sounds
That's
very
the
hard,
trick.
but worthwhile.
It's imagination. Take the word imagination.
Okay.
We were always told when things fantastic happened when we were little, it's only your imagination. Like when my daughter came in and told me about, hanging out with a fawn and petting it and, hanging out. Well, some parents would say, oh, that doesn't happen. And then that begins to shut the door on that ability for that kind of communication because it's not acceptable. Or if a child has premonitions that come true and they're not always good and they get punished or somehow made to feel like they're to blame for the consequences of what they saw and spoke, then that's another door shutting.
Yeah. I think the problem is with the phrase, it's just your imagination. The problem is with the word just.
Oh,
we don't.
absolutely. Imagination is I-Magi-nation. We are the magicians that are creating our nation. The problem is that the masses in the collective consciousness are not aware enough to be smart about what they're wishing for or what they're eating.
Well, let me ask you this real fast, Nikki. Let's just suppose that I live in an urban environment like New York City or a big city environment. It might be hard for me to get out and sort of commune with nature. What are some things I could do to reestablish my bonds with the earth?
Well, I would say a book like Power Animal Meditations, which doesn't just tell you about the gifts of the various animal totems and some plant and mineral allies.
Mm-hmm.
It actually gives you journeys, guided visualizations that you can take to put you in touch with. And then you learn how to communicate by practicing those. All my books are like that. Alchemical Healing, a guided, what's the subtitle of it? A Guide to Spiritual, Physical, and Transformational Medicine is self-initiatory.
Mm-hmm.
You can get that book, and there will be journeys. You can either tape them or have somebody read them to you, or if you're quick enough, you can just get the journey while you're reading it. And then you will have the experience because, knowledge only gets you so far, but experience, when you feel. And it's a matter of awakening all of your inner senses and realizing that although sight is the first that comes to mind for everyone really wants to be a seer. But sight can be elusive, whereas feelings, you can't fake a feeling.
One could do the exercise by narrating it into a voice recorder, for example, and then playing it back while going through this sort of guided experience. Would that work out well, you think?
Yeah. All my books, whether it's the Shamanic Mysteries of Egypt or Planetary Healing, the trilogy that we're talking about is Power Animal Meditations, Alchemical Healing, and Planetary Healing. A guide to what's planetary healing? Spirit medicine for global transformation. That's a trilogy of books. Power Animals is more of a reference book where you have these 50 different allies. And in the process of doing this work, you learn how to connect with anything or anyone you want to. And receive whatever gift that they have that's appropriate. And the first journey, the journey that's in the book, is your introduction to that ally, and they'll show you a particular gift. And some of them are very complex and have many gifts, and others it's just a very specific gift that they want to share. But as with everything, it's all about relationships and building and developing the relationship. Like you meet the bear, which is one of the most ubiquitous healers on the planet, and then you sit down and have tea with this bear in its cave, and the bear will teach you about a variety of things. Plus, the bear can come in and do psychic surgery because it has these, claws that, their claws don't come in like cats do, so they have to be very adept.
Right.
I've done very, very delicate and precise eye surgery using bear.
It sounds like a fascinating read, Nikki. I'm going to pick up a copy for myself. Unfortunately, we were about out of time on this interview. I want to thank you very warmly for joining us tonight.
Well, I'm really happy to be here. I've enjoyed talking to you, and I hope that some of your listeners will join me on my Totems Ally, my Spirit Allies class that's coming up very shortly.
That's right. It seems like that's going to be starting on June the 17th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Pacific time, and it's going to be Tuesdays and Thursdays, June 17th, 19th, 24th, and 26th, so you still have time to register for that. I highly recommend it. Also, I highly recommend Planetary Healing, Spirit Medicine for Global Transformation. That definitely is going to be very informative, and I just love the idea of rediscovering all my spirit allies through the animals.
Online store Hathor's Mirror for this trilogy. I can't remember whether it's 20 or 30% off, but it's a really good deal.
Awesome.
Those three. So,
well, Nikki, thank you so much for dropping by Psychic Viewpoint tonight. We hope to have you on the show sometime in the future. I'm sure I'll have a lot more questions by then.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Oh, me too. Bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Hello, my name is Res Miranda. If you're having relationship, career, or life issues, I'm inviting you to experience what it's like to have access to professional, highly accurate psychics and spiritual advisors you can trust to care and help you. Register now to get your free 6-minute reading by telephone or chat. Get answers. Get access. Psychic access, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. PsychicAccess.com.